horrific discovery: teen's best friend killed mom with a frying pan. Before the horrifying tragedy, the story of Sydney Powell and her mother, Brenda, was a portrait of complete maternal love. They were described by everyone as best friends, always together, loving and supporting one another. Stephen Powell, Sydney's father, once proudly remarked that Sydney was a miniature version of Brenda. Mother and daughter shared the same personality, aspirations, and enthusiasm. Sydney Powell, a 19-year-old young woman, was considered the pride of her family when she received the Dean's Scholarship to Mount Union University in the fall of 2018. She was a stellar student with an initial GPA of 3.8 and was expected to be a shining example of success. Brenda, with her boundless love, was always by her daughter's side, encouraging and supporting Sydney in every step of her life. "I remember she and her mom were always texting," Litterdale recalled. "I think Sydney truly admired her mom, wanted to be like Brenda, always there to help people, always putting others first." However, beneath this bright surface, a tragic story was slowly taking shape. By the fall of 2019, Sydney's grades began to drop alarmingly. From being an exceptional student, she gradually fell into academic decline, with her GPA dropping so significantly that she was placed on academic probation. The university ultimately canceled her enrollment for the spring semester of 2020. Sydney faced a crisis. Instead of candidly sharing the truth with her family, she chose to conceal it. She continued to return to campus, pretending that everything was fine, even lying to her friends and family about her academic situation. A week before the tragedy, Sydney was forced to move out of her dormitory and stay at a hotel, further exacerbating her psychological burden. March 3, 2020, became the tipping point of this tragedy. While Brenda was on a phone call with a faculty member from Mount Union University discussing Sydney's academic status, something terrible happened. In a fit of rage and panic, Sydney brutally attacked her mother, using a kitchen frying pan and stabbing her with a kitchen knife, an act that left everyone in shock. "You just had to look into her eyes. Like, that wasn't her," said Hannah Litterdale, Sydney's friend, on Snapped. "She wasn't there. I think watching the body cam footage was harder than I thought it would be. The Sydney Powell I knew would never have done something like that." University faculty members who were on the phone with Brenda Powell reported that their conversation abruptly ended. They reported to 911 that they heard a series of strange noises that they described as some loud thuds, screaming, and then just some other unusual sounds before the phone went dead. Akron Police Lieutenant David Whidden explained on Snapped. They tried calling back, but got no answer. They were concerned that something had happened to Brenda. After repeated unanswered calls, a woman finally picked up the phone. They described the calm voice saying, "This is Brenda." Whidden recounted, and because they knew Sydney as a student, they immediately recognized it was Sydney. They asked, "Sydney, is that you?" And then the phone went dead again. She never mentioned anything about an intruder. When the police arrived at the Powell home, they encountered the exact scenario Sydney had claimed: a break-in. Sydney was just hysterical, Whidden said. She was blocking the officers from going down the hallway. She mentioned something about an intruder. Someone had broken in, so they didn't know what they were dealing with. A back window of the house was shattered, and the patio door was unlocked. Brenda was found lying on the bedroom floor, surrounded by blood, with a cast iron skillet and a kitchen knife near her body. "I've never seen anything this brutal before," Whidden remarked. Brenda suffered severe head trauma, and she had been stabbed multiple times. "We were left wondering what could have triggered such immense rage." Sydney also behaved oddly. She just lay there trembling and scratching at the street. Stephen Powell, Sydney's father, recalled, "No mumbling, no speaking at all." However, bloody footprints in the house matched Sydney's, and she had blood and cuts on her hands. The police believed she had broken the window herself to make it look like an intruder was responsible. She was arrested that day for murdering her mother. After the incident, Sydney was diagnosed with schizophrenia, a mental illness that typically emerges in late adolescence or early adulthood. She was treated with medication and became stable enough to stay with her family while awaiting a trial delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Her doctors and family believed she was unaware of her actions at the time of the incident. However, authorities and prosecutors held a different view. They argued that Sydney was fully aware and intentional in her actions. Her attorney sought evaluations from 3 separate doctors. All 3 doctors stated that she experienced long periods of lucid thinking, but these were interrupted by severe and significant psychotic episodes, said Malarsic. It's absurd to suggest she killed her mother simply because she was expelled from school. Killing Brenda didn't solve that problem. That kind of attack, that kind of brutality, was completely out of character for Sydney and demonstrates that she was insane. The Powell family requested that Sydney be declared incompetent to stand trial and that criminal charges be dropped. However, the state of Ohio pursued a criminal trial, and her lawyer pleaded insanity. Prosecutors claimed Sydney's academic troubles were the reason Brenda was killed. The school made it very clear she wasn't allowed to stay anymore. Kokovich explained, but she also knew she couldn't go home without her parents finding out, so she didn't want that option either. She was running out of money. She was running out of options. Prosecutors also argued that she was coherent during the murder. Although she may have had some mental health issues at the time, her actions related to the crime clearly align with someone who knew exactly what they were doing and then tried to cover it up. Kokovich said, at the moment she decided to stop her mother from speaking to the dean, and at the moment she realized her lie was about to be exposed. Prosecutor Elliot Kokovich said on Snapped, she snapped. The trial became a struggle between the family's plea for Sydney to receive psychiatric treatment and prosecutors, who believed she should be held legally accountable for her actions. Ultimately, the jury sided with the prosecution. Sydney Powell was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years, meaning she could be eligible for release in 2038. At the age of 38, her father, Stephen Powell, maintained, "We understand this wasn't Sydney. This was a very small, very brief moment in time where something went terribly wrong." The story of Sydney Powell stands as a heartbreaking lesson on academic pressure, the complexity of mental health, and the devastating consequences of dishonesty with oneself and one's family. From a promising student, Sydney fell into the depths of tragedy, destroying not only her own life, but also that of the mother she loved most. The legacy of this story lies not just in the crime committed, but in the haunting questions it raises. What happened to Sydney? Why did a young woman resort to such extremes? And how can we prevent similar tragedies in the future? Academic pressure, feelings of failure, fear of judgment, and untreated mental health issues culminated in Sydney's extreme actions. This painful incident highlights the importance of creating a safe family and social environment where young people can share their struggles without fear of judgment or punishment. The story of Sydney Powell is not just a crime, but also a cautionary tale about the dire consequences of neglecting or trivializing mental health. It is a lesson on the value of honesty, mutual care, and the importance of providing psychological support for young people. This tragic outcome serves as a reminder that beneath the surface of success, silent suffering can exist, and if left unaddressed, it can lead to devastating consequences.